Rancho Lilac public meeting. We'll be starting promptly at 6 p.m. and there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. For the meantime though, can you just, housekeeping, can you just turn your video off and put yourself on mute? And this will help make it so there's not any feedback as we're giving presentations. So this meeting will be recorded and that recording will be made available to the public. We'll begin promptly at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Hello, Keith.
Hello there. It's on.
Alex.
We'll start at 6 o'clock. It's on, and we're going there.
Hi, Keith.
Hello there. I got so many screens open on my window right now, so kind of managing all that. Colleen, hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm here to support you in any way, Keith.
All right, we're live. There's about 20 participants on the line. 32 Good. Actually now.
Nice.
And we're starting at 6 o'clock. Welcome everyone. We'll start in a couple minutes. I want to thank you for just joining Sandag and Caltrans at this public meeting regarding Rancho Lilac. And just be mindful to mute your mics and to avoid background noise during the presentation. We'll have the opportunity to do questions and answers at the end of the meeting, and we'll be using the raised hand feature. And for those of you who don't know Zoom that well, if you go down the bottom bar, there's a participants button. And if you click on that, you'll see a bunch of menus, including a raised hand feature. We'll go over that later on in the presentation. So we'll start shortly. Again, this meeting will be recorded, and so it will be that recording will be made available to the public later on. A couple minutes and we'll start. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you could all join us tonight. I'll take that time out of your evening to talk about Rancho Lilac. And And if we have next slide, Arthur. So my name is Keith Greer. I'm a principal planner in the Sandag Regional Planning Department of Sandag. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking time, spending your evening to talk about this remarkable project and remarkable piece of property. So I want to kind of just go over the meeting agenda for tonight. We have it scheduled from 6 until 7:30, and we'll have a short presentation. I'll do introductions first, followed by our welcome remarks by Hassan Akrada, our Sandag Executive Director, who will then turn it over to Kim Smith for a short presentation, and we'll follow by questions and discussions. We'll have ample time to answer questions and discuss the project. We'll have over an hour, we estimate. And if we need to go a little bit longer, we can to answer all your questions. Again, this meeting will be recorded, and that recording will be made available later on. Next slide, please. So in addition to myself, I have said we have Hassan Akrada, our Executive Director, here today. We also have Kim Smith, our Environmental Mitigation Program Manager. From Caltrans, we have Bruce April, who's the Deputy Director of Environmental, as well as Chris Schmidt, who's the Deputy Director of Right of Way. Also with us is Colin Clemenson, our Regional Planning Director from Sandag. And again, if I could just housekeeping, people can mute their mics, that would be helpful for the presentation. So our goal today is to address the why, what, and how of the project. Why was the property acquired? What actually is being proposed by the Sandag Board of Directors? And how Sandag will propose to protect the property's unique resources while allowing for future public access to occur. We will dive into the presentation shortly, but first let me turn the presentation over to Hassan Akrada, our Executive Director of Sandag, for a few remarks. Hassan?
Thank you, Keith. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for attending this meeting. My name is Hassan Akrada. I'm the Executive Director of Sandag. I wish we could meet in person, but that will have to wait for better times. Thank you for your emails and interest about the Rancho Lilac property located in the Valley Center community. It is a unique asset and special property for the region. As part of our regional sustainable community strategy environmental mitigation program, we acquired about 8,780 acres, 5 times the size of Balboa Park, within the region to conserve the environment while responsibly delivering critical transportation infrastructure. The 902-acre Rancho Lilac is an example of this proactive effort. The property was acquired with Transnet funds by Caltrans to promote regional habitat connectivity along the San Luis 3 watershed and meet the environmental requirement and the Transnet ordinance for the expansion of State Route 76. Sandag is assisting Caltrans with the transfer of the property to a qualified land manager for perpetual management. Since the management funds would come from Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program, Sandag took the lead in the procurement of services for a landowner and manager through a request for proposal process. At the May Sandag Board Directors hearing, staff clearly heard the direction from the board to continue working on a recommendation that did not preclude future use of the property by the public, while protecting the unique biological, historic, and prehistoric features of the property. Sandag is committed to retaining the ability for the public to more fully enjoy the Rancho Lilac property and is working on a recommendation that allows this to occur. My staff has developed recommendations that would help conserve the unique biological, historical, and prehistorical resources of the property and provide the legal assurances that a future trail will not be precluded. We would like to hear directly from you, and we would like to answer your question honestly and truthfully. And I really did appreciate all the emails I got from many of you. Our goal here is not only to fulfill the requirement of Transnet, but also to move responsibly for a region that we love, for a region that we call home. Time to turn it to Kim Smith, who is one of the best in the business, and in case Keith is very modest guy, he's great to work with. So with that, I'll turn it to Kim. At the end, after the presentations, we're more than happy to take your questions. And again, you should expect honest, truthful answer for the questions. With that, Kim.
Thank you, Hassan. Next slide, please. So this is Rancho Lilac. This is the property we're all here to discuss tonight. For those of you that aren't that familiar with it, it's a 902-acre property located in the community of Valley Center within the county of San Diego. Next slide, please. While Rancho Lilac was historically used as a cattle farm, it still retains abundant wildlife habitat and endangered species, as well as historic and prehistoric resources, shown above. The property contains more than a dozen different sensitive vegetation communities, including coastal sage scrub and riparian forest. Keys Creek, which traverses the property, is an important east-west connector for wildlife, linking the foothills to the San Luis Rey River Valley. In addition, it is also home to many sensitive species anticipated for coverage in the Draft North County Multiple Species Conservation Program. The property is also of historical significance. In addition to several archaeological resources, numerous historic buildings and structures that require permanent preservation by the state of California are present on the property. These resources are directly associated with some past owners who are prominent figures in the San Diego region, including UN Ambassador Irving Solomon, who hosted world leaders at the ranch, including President Dwight Eisenhower and India leader Mahatma Gandhi, further contributing to the property's rich cultural history. Next slide, please. The property was acquired by Caltrans in October of 2011 as net benefit biological mitigation required under the Transnet Ordinance for the State Route 76 highway improvement projects. As shown on the map above, it was part of a larger package of conservation, restoration, and infrastructure improvements along the San Luis Rey River Valley that resulted in an environmental net benefit compared to typical mitigation, which seeks to only offset impacts. The acquisition of the property was funded 100% by the Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program. Funding from the Environmental Mitigation Program can only be used for the acquisition, restoration, and management of property acquired for the mitigation of regional and local transportation projects. Next slide, please. So what are Caltrans and Sandag's roles with this property? Well, first, Caltrans' role. They acquired and they currently own and manage the property. As previously mentioned, it was purchased for mitigation for the State Route 76 widening projects. Caltrans is seeking to transfer the property to a qualified land manager to manage in perpetuity, and they need approval from the California Transportation Commission before the property can be transferred. Sandag's role is to provide funding through the Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program for the acquisition of Rancho Lilac. Sandag will provide funding in a form of an endowment for perpetual management of the property. In addition, we are the contracting lead for the RFP for land management. Next slide, please. So the slide above shows the RFP process and its current status. So on the left side of the slide, beginning with the acquisition of the property in 2011 by Caltrans, then moving to 2014, the Sandag board authorized the release of the RFP. In 2016, the RFP was released to the public and 3 proposals were received. Then in 2017, San Diego Habitat Conservancy was selected for negotiations. We know there have been many questions regarding how long it has taken us to get here since the release of the RFP. From 2017 to 2020, during negotiations of the endowment with the San Diego Habitat Conservancy, several issues had to be resolved by Caltrans on the property before it could be transferred. Caltrans had to evaluate the potential for historic and prehistoric resources on site. They also conducted lead abatement and asbestos removal on some of those historic buildings. In addition, weed abatement, waste removal, and tenant management was also ongoing. This has led us to the May 22nd, 2020 Sandag board meeting, where the board of directors was asked to approve the executive director to execute an agreement for the transfer and long-term management of the property. Next slide, please. Requirements of the request for proposals included both land and fiscal management experience. The San Diego Habitat Conservancy met those requirements. Specifically, they are a the San Diego Habitat Conservancy is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. They are a qualified land manager in San Diego County pursuant to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife qualifications to hold and manage mitigation lands within Region 5 and 6 pursuant to Senate Bill 1094. They currently manage 31 open space preserves totaling over 1,800 acres. In addition, 5 preserves totaling 600 acres are currently under contract. In February of 2016, SDHC was granted accreditation by the Land Trust Accreditation Commission. They are the only accredited land trust headquartered in San Diego County. Next slide, please. So once the property is transferred and the endowment is placed, the selected land manager is required to develop and implement a draft habitat management plan within 18 months of the transfer. The habitat management plan will be used to guide the use and management of the property to maintain populations of listed species, protect and restore sensitive habitats, protect historical and cultural resources and other open space values, and maintain water quality. Contents of the HMMP include, well, first, existing and baseline conditions. The future land manager needs to go out and tell us, what is going on with the biological resources, cultural resources, exotic plant control. What is their proposal for property management, security, and community relations? Agricultural operations, facility and tenants. What are the water rights and irrigation plans, water pollution and hazardous waste? They then need to come up with the plan goals and objectives, management strategies and actions, a monitoring program, and finally a detailed implementation plan, schedule, and cost. So I'd like to go back to the community relations portion. The RFP required that a community relations strategy be prepared that includes direct outreach to neighbors surrounding the property and to the broader community of Valley Center. San Diego Habitat Conservancy's proposal included specific language regarding trails. Specifically, the Valley Center Trails Association would be consulted regarding the feasibility of creating a multi-use trail through the property in accordance with the County of San Diego General Plan Trail element, which shows a trail running east to west through the Rancho Lilac property. The RFP did not include the construction or maintenance of trails as a requirement of the proposal. Once the HMP is completed, the land manager will provide a draft to Sandag and Caltrans to review, who will solicit comments from outside organizations, including the resource agencies. Next slide, please. This leads us to the May 22nd Board of Directors meeting, where members of the public brought up the concerns that transfer of the property from Caltrans to a private entity could possibly preclude future public access and trails within Rancho Lilac. Historically and currently, there is no formal public access or trails on the property. The county general plan shown on the screen shows plans for future trails running north to south along Lilac Road and east to west across the center of the property. The property is shown in green. It is also our understanding that the Valley Center is currently going through an update to their community plan, which would also include a plan for trails. So now I'm going to turn it over to Keith Greer, who is going to discuss staff's recommended approach. Keith?
Hi, thanks, Kim. So we got this really special property out there, and it really is nice as you're walking around. You got these unique biological resources, endangered species, historic resources. You got these prehistoric resources that Kim showed pictures of. So we want to make sure that all those resources are protected in the future, because that's why the property was purchased. At the same time, we want to accommodate future trails. So how can this be done? So the next slide, please. So the original proposal went like this. So the first starts with a state transfer of property. You remember what Kim said, that the property is owned by Caltrans. In order to transfer this property outside the state control, the California Transportation Commission has to transfer the property. But before that can occur, a couple things had to be set in place. One is the property had to be cleaned up, and that's what took so long during the RFP process. All those historic evaluations, make sure the buildings were habitable, make sure the lead was removed, and asbestos. So now we're at the point in time where when we identify a qualified land manager, then we can go to the California Transportation Commission and says, we have an endowment for a qualified land manager, and therefore the state can transfer the property in what we call fee title, basically the ownership transfers. What then Sandag would get back is a conservation easement. The conservation easement says what can and can't occur on the property. It basically protects those resources out there. By getting a conservation easement, Sandag would then put an endowment with a third party so that management of the property can occur in perpetuity. So conservation easement, endowment equals transfer of property. There's then an 18-month period as the habitat management plan is developed, and that 18-month period would have county and public input, as Kim just identified. So at the May 22nd hearing, there was a lot of concern brought up of if the property is transferred outside of a government control, transferred to a private entity, that there would be a loss of having assurances that a trail could be accommodated. So we scratched our heads and said, how can we work on that? So Sandag worked with 2 outside attorneys who used to be former county counsel and used to advise the county park and recreation department. We laid out the issue to them and we suggested they help craft a solution. The proposal that came forth is as such. We would provide additional assurances. So in addition to the conservation easement, Sandag would be requesting a trail access easement for the future. So this would define the ability, the right to have a trail go through the property and where it makes the most sense. So that retains the right and the ability to have a trail go through the property. Sandag would have that access easement granted to itself. In addition, Sandag would propose that a 5-year exclusivity agreement be provided to the county. So this gives the county 5 years of exclusive negotiations to plan for, design, environmentally clear a proposed trail. And why is this necessary? Well, we mentioned that the Valley Center Community Plan update is occurring. And that gives the county time and space to not only plan for trails on this property, but also the entire Valley Center community. Where are those trails going to connect to off the property, and where will they connect to in the entire community plan? The county can then move through and design an environmental clearance of the trail. And when that's done, then a future transfer of the trail could occur to the county of San Diego. So the big thing here is 2 additional assurances, a trail access easement and a 5-year exclusivity agreement. To be clear though, Sandag, neither Sandag nor our contractor, San Diego Habitat Conservancy, would be building, environmentally clearing, or maintaining the trail. We've always envisioned that that would be done by a third party. In addition, the Transnet funds cannot pay for those clearance of the trail and the development of the trail. Next slide. So you probably have a lot of questions on the details of the easements and agreements, and we can ask those in a second. But I kind of wanted to lay out the next steps going forward. So based upon our input and your feedback tonight, we want to hear from you, so it'll help us craft our recommendation and refine our recommendation to the board. The board of directors has chose on May 23rd to hear this item in closed session. And you may ask, why closed session? Well, this action fundamentally is a real estate action.
It establishes an endowment for acceptance of a conservation easement and a trail agreement. Excuse me. The board of directors want a chance to meet with the attorneys to understand the legal and contractual aspects of the property. I'm sorry, can you still hear me? Based upon direction from the board, Sandag will bring this item back to the board later this fall and open.
I think I'm back.
We can hear
Thank
you.
you very much. Okay, so I'm going to start again there. The Sandag board has chosen to bring this item to a closed session, and you ask why a closed session? Because at the heart of it, this is a real estate issue. We're establishing an endowment, and for that endowment, we get a conservation and an access easement back to Sandag. The Sandag board wants a chance
to meet with their attorneys to understand the legal and contractual issues of this property. And basically, Kim, you need to take over a second. Okay.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, Keith.
Thank you. As technology gives out on me, and I'm trying to use my headsets and they die on me. So again, Sandag will be taking this to closed session. We'll be discussing the legal aspects of the contract that will be going forward with San Diego Habitat Conservancy, the legal aspects of the real estate action, that's the agreements and the conservation easements that will be going to them, and understanding all their proposal and their options available to them. So they want to have a chance to do some closed session to talk to their attorneys and really understand the deal. But no, let me be clear, no action can actually occur at the closed session. That would be actually a future board meeting. We'll be directed as Sandag staff to go to a future board meeting and open session, either November or December, for approval of land management contract as part of an open session. Next slide. So thank you very much for bearing with us tonight, and thank you for my technology issues here. We're going to open it up for questions and discussions. I put up here the Sandag contact. If you have questions on this project, you want to email us. If we don't get your answers resolved tonight, you can always email us at pio@sandag.org. And here we go to the part of the questions and answers questions. So in your Zoom, you have a raise hand feature. It's under participants, and it's a little blue hand that says raise hand. So in a second, Kim and I will help facilitate questions and answer on this using that raised hand feature. But first of all, I wanted to give a chance for the San Diego Habitat Conservancy and the County of San Diego Park and Recreation to provide comments on the proposal. First, let's start with Mr. Don Scholes from the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. Don, can you turn your video on and your mic on and give us a presentation?
There. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Scholes. I'm the Executive Director of the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. And I just wanted to reiterate a couple of the items that Keith had mentioned and give you this policy position that our board crafted. And that's the San Diego Habitat Conservancy looks forward to fulfilling our role in conserving, preserving, and managing Rancho Lilac for generations to come. The Habitat Management Plan has not yet been developed, and we do not oppose the inclusion of trails in the plan. While the decision to establish and implement trails does not rest with SDHC, we stand ready to work with the lead agencies and other stakeholders.
Of recreation we manage about 53,000 acres of parkland, of which majority is preserve. We do have trails in some of our preserves where it's appropriate, and we're able to balance that by protecting the sensitive resources. We also manage numerous historical sites and manage about 370 miles of trails. So as a leader in preservation and recreation, we appreciate the opportunity to work with Sandag to find a solution here. And we definitely agree that with this property, there needs to be an appropriate amount of trail network. It's about 900 acres. So having some trails throughout the property is important, although the primary purpose of this is for conservation. And so we do appreciate having that balanced approach. The idea that Sandag has presented a trail easement approach is, excuse me, it's definitely trying to address the community's concerns about having trails. From my understanding, the Conservancy would lead the efforts to do a habitat management plan. They would work with the community and other agencies such as the county to determine where trails could go on the property while protecting those sensitive resources. You know, and then would work to determine where the trail easements should go and be secured. The issue is related to funding, and we've talked with Sandag about that. If county were to take on the trail easements, we would have to identify the funding. That would require us going to our Board of Supervisors, and it would be up to them to make the determination about whether funding for implementation of those trails is in our budget. I just wanted to also mention that we did provide a proposal after the RFP to Sandag earlier this year. We have offered to also take on the property as a land manager. With this, it would be a very similar process where we would own the property. We would go through a habitat management plan, work with the community, and you know, with that option, the county would be able to have this property be part of our multiple species conservation program and have it count towards our climate action goal plan. We do have 3 large preserves in the area that are within 5 miles, Mountain Meadow, San Luis Rey, and Keys Creek. So we have the experience in this area. However, we recognize that the Sandag is working through their process, and we respect that. And we really look forward to working with Sandag and the community in whatever way feasible and as appropriate to ensure that this property is conserved while also having a reasonable amount of recreation, passive recreation on the property. And that's it. That was all I wanted to say. I'll hand that back over to Keith.
Thanks, Deb. I appreciate it. So thanks for bearing with us. We're going to answer questions that you may have. So Kim Smith's going to help facilitate this. She'll be calling out your name. Our production folks will allow you to then ask questions, turn your video on if you want to turn your video on, and we'll go that way. So please, if you have questions, please raise your hand. And Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you to facilitate.
Okay, I think I see the first raised hand is Marisol Eaton.
Hi, Marisol. Looks like you can actually speak.
Hey, this is actually Ben Mills of Supervisor Desmond's office. Marisol is actually on staff. I'm trying to turn on my video, and I don't know if I have the capability to do it right.
Well, Ben, we can hear you loud and clear, so why don't you...
Great. Well, again, first and foremost, I want to appreciate and thank everybody that attended this Zoom meeting. I don't know how many people are on right now, and I apologize for the unfortunate events that occurred, but my name is Ben Mills. I'm with Supervisor Desmond's office. And number one, and first and foremost, I want to thank everybody for attending. And we want the trail system and the preserve within the County of San Diego. It is District 5's, being Supervisor Desmond's district, to advocate to basically obtain that piece of preserved land to manage and to ensure that we have trails in perpetuity. I will say this, you know,
Looks like we lost Ben. Is he going to come back?
see me now, huh?
There we go. We can see you and hear you. Hi, Ben.
All right. So we've heard a little bit about dedicating an easement on the trail and making sure that a trail would be available for construction in the future. And let me say that Sandag, I appreciate that, and I understand where Sandag is coming from, but that's very different than actually constructing a trail and ensuring that there is public access. And the difference between those two are money. There is a difference between the endowment with the San Diego Habitat Conservancy and the difference with the County of San Diego. The County of San Diego actually asked to take over this trail, albeit it was later in the process, and we can talk about timeline if that question comes up. But we were also willing to do something that the Habitat Conservancy was not going to do, and that is actually construct the trails. We were going to construct, maintain, and ensure liability on those trails so that everybody within the district could enjoy, everybody in the county for that matter, could enjoy those trails. So when the Habitat Conservancy takes it over, what I hear, and I could be wrong, so Sandag, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, they will dedicate an easement for a future trail alignment that the County of San Diego would then have to fund to construct, maintain, and be liable for. And the concern with that is the County of San Diego is all about constructing trail systems, but they do it for a cause, because all our trail systems are constructed and maintained by your tax dollars. So we want to make sure that we're getting the bang for our buck. If we do not get the preserve to manage, we have other issues on the line, including the Multiple Species Conservation Act, which we're basically required to abide by to ensure that we have adequate habitat property within the County of San Diego preserved. We've got a upcoming climate action plan that we need to comply with to ensure that we have adequate open space to ensure that we meet state greenhouse gas emissions. And we also have a general plan policy that requires us to have a specific amount of open space per the general plan. Now, typically what we would do is we would look at those policies and those requirements, and we would purchase or acquire, in this case, a piece of land to ensure that we have preserve over that land so that we can get credit of those things. And as a secondary benefit, what we would typically do is we'd open it to the public, because we're absolutely an advocate of ensuring taxpayer purchased open space is open to the taxpayer. And that's one thing that is differing between these two things, these two proposals. The proposal from the San Diego Habitat Conservancy is a a proposal to open up easements that the county then could take over at a later date, and then we would have to fund with none of those credits that I just talked about. Whereas what we're saying and what we're proposing for is to actually take over the preserve as the manager and ensure that we have trails once we take over so that everybody can enjoy. And that's one of the differences that I wanted to bring up. And I really appreciate everybody's time here. And again, I'll be on the upcoming public Zoom as well. So thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sandag. You guys are all awesome, and appreciate you all. Thank you.
Let me just address really quickly the county's proposal. The county's a fine land manager, one of the best in the state. Worked with them for the last 25 years. So the issue here is that the RFP process that we have, we take it to fruition. We have worked with through that process. We've identified a qualified land manager, and we are now moving forward to the board. It's ultimately the board's decision on what they want to do. We feel that right now, we have a proposal with additional assurances that would allow for a future trail to be built out there. Absolutely correct. It would not be Sandag building a trail. It would not be the San Diego Habitat Conservancy. It would be a third party. So I think the real issue for us to focus in on is how can we make sure that Sandag right now, there is no access to that property for trails? How do we make sure that we don't jeopardize that access in the future? And I think we come up with a very creative solution. But I want to hear from you tonight. So why don't we move on, next speaker.
Okay, I am going to call on Lori Flora. Lori?
So Lori, you can unmute your microphone and ask a question.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Huh, that's interesting. No video. I'm surprised at that.
We can hear you loud and clear, so we can start off.
Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. You can hear me. We have heard in the past some very different things about trails, all the way from San Diego Habitat Community Conservancy saying absolutely no trails, never will be trails. They said that to us. And now we've heard some different things tonight that seem to be night and day different. I assume that the situation has changed, and that's why what we're hearing tonight is so different from what we've heard in the past. Can we assume that what we're hearing tonight is absolutely the present status and not just another story? That's my question.
So thank you for bringing that up. And I think there was a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to have this public workshop and a public opportunity to talk to you. So all along, the San Diego Habitat Conservancy wanted to work with the Valley Center Trails Association on where a trail could be accommodated on the property. That was part of their initial response to the RFP. It's in writing, and we've talked to them. Somewhere along the line, there got a confusion between them saying they would accommodate a future trail if they had ownership, with the issue of, oh, we're not funding the trail. And I think Supervisor Desmond, Representative Ben Mills said it right. There's a difference between saying you'll accommodate a trail and you will fund a trail. And to be clear, the proposal right now is that a trail can occur on this property if it doesn't affect any of the conservation resources which it was protected, which we bought it for. It's a big piece of property. There's lots of dirt roads out there right now. There's lots of opportunities to create a trail system. So again, a trail system will be accommodated. The additional securities or certainties that we're proposing right now come in an access easement. So that's something that Sandag retains and says a trail can be accommodated out there. Sandag will work with any entity that wants to build that trail and maintain it. We're hoping that San Diego County will take that up. And that's why we're also proposing an exclusivity agreement. That's the second thing that's new. Access agreement's new, exclusivity agreement's new. Both those items together allow us to move forward with additional assurances that a future trail can be accommodated on the properry. So
okay.
Thank you.
If I may add to that, this is Hassan Ikrara. Just because we want to be very truthful and we don't want to mislead anybody. What's new here is we will have an easement for any entity in the future if they have the money to do the trails within the agreement. But let me make it very clear that Sandag does not have the funds to build trails. If the county, like Ben alluded to, if the county are interested in building trails, they will have that opportunity with this agreement. But we are not saying that we're going to build the trails because we don't have funding to go to the trails. And we welcome if the county could accommodate the funding for the trails in the future. With this agreement, they can do that. But I don't want you to leave today thinking that we have the funding to build trails. We have the ability to do it in the future if funding becomes available.
May I respond?
Would you like a, Larry, why don't you do a quick response and then our quick question if you have one. We're trying to answer questions first. But please.
Okay, just want to point out what Ben said appears to make it extremely unlikely that trails would ever be built, although it's theoretically possible they could be built. Clearly the county would not be interested in doing that if they aren't able to manage the property. So it's pretty clear that we're creating a situation where the trails theoretically could be built and everything appears to be good, as opposed to an agreement that actually would get the trails built. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person on the list is Mr. Rudolph. I think you just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay, I'm one of the people that met with Mr. Scholes twice, in which he took a very firm position that there would not be ever trails on the property, contrary to his statement tonight, that he was happy to work with us to do that. The references that you've made in the beginning of the presentation were to a trail, and we were not interested in a trail. We were interested in a trail system in the property. My question, and you have also told us in exchange of emails that one of the options that's available to the Sandag board is to terminate the RFP process and start over. And my question is you have told us that, is that still true that that is an option, number one? And number two, if the board decides to terminate the process and start over, does starting over mean that the first thing you do is offer the property to the county? And if the county then accepts the property, there's no need for an RFP process because Caltrans will have a proper entity to take over the property.
Well, thank you for bringing up the question. With regard, sorry.
Third question is, if the board terminates the RFP process and Sandag offers the property to the county and the county accepts it, would the conservation easement that Mr. Scholes was negotiating with Sandag that would define trails as development and prohibit development, therefore preventing trails, would that conservation easement also be forced on the county? Three questions.
Let me address each of those questions in order. So Mr. Scholes specifically addressed his response to the RFP and his clarifying statement from his board. So the clarification is that he will work with the Valley Centers Trail Association on a trail system out there. When I say a trail system, it's not just a trail, it's a trail system. To add additional certainty and security on that, that's where the easement from Sandag comes in. Sandag would have the right, not the obligation, but the right to enforce a trail system that does not impact the conservation values for why the property was purchased. That's the number one reason. We want to preserve the conservation values. We also want to be able to accommodate trails. We can do both. You mentioned Caltrans. Caltrans is the owner of the property. So Caltrans will ultimately be, through the state California Transportation Commission, will ultimately be the ones to determine where and who takes the property. But they need to do that with a qualified land manager and an endowment. That's where Sandag comes involved. Regardless of who takes the property, the conservation easement would be provided to Sandag. And the conservation easement is being crafted to allow for a trail system as long as that trail system does not reduce or impact that conservation values for which the property was acquired. So I want to be real clear. A trail system can be accommodated out there, but it can't reduce the biological, historical, and cultural resources for the property. Can that be done? Yes, absolutely. It's done all the time as part of the habitat management plans. Daly Ranch, San Luis Rey, they all have trail systems. They all are being managed for both conservation values and access. The last item you mentioned was regards to the County of San Diego proposal. And like I mentioned before, the County of San Diego is a fine property manager. Sandag, though, has to go through our current process. We've selected a manager for a contract at San Diego Habitat Conservancy. Staff will be making a recommendation. The recommendation will be as outlined. It includes both the conservation easement, the endowment, plus the access agreement and the 5-year exclusivity agreement. If the county or if the board chooses, the board can choose to direct us to enter into a contract, or they can choose us to rescind the RFP. Each of those has implications, and I don't want to speak for the board. Hope that answers your questions. You can ask, raise your hand later on if we can answer more questions. Kim?
Okay, the next hand up is Don S.
Hi, Ken. This is Don Scholes, and I caught the end of. I came back on at the end of Mr. Mills's presentation, so I'll be asking you later about what the details were of that presentation. But I wanted to respond to Mr. Rudolph. Rich, when I met with you and Fred on the 28th of 2019, regarding, I was pretty adamant that no trails were included in the RFP and the project that we had bid on. But I was pretty adamant as well, saying we're looking forward to working with Valley Center Trails Association to see how we can partner. But also, I think it also was expressed at that meeting that the future trails could be accommodated per the Valley Center community plan trails element, but that work would be performed and designed by others, just the way Keith has described it tonight.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for clarification of that. And I do want to mention again that staff provides only recommendations to the board. It's the board's decision on any kind of contracts that they enter into. We go on to the next person.
The next person is Fred.
Okay.
Hi, Fred. You should be able to unmute yourself, and we heard you a little bit there.
Okay. All right. This is Fred Wallman, and I'm president of the Valley Center Trails Association. And, ever since this thing started in 2011 or 12 or 13, the only communication anybody's had with the Valley Center Trails Association was when Mr. Scholes called me in 2018 and said, hi, we're going to manage the property and there's going to be no trails on the property. But that's a long time ago, so let's not even deal with that. If fee title, let's just assume this all goes forward with San Diego Habitat. And there is this management plan. Is this floating easement or this trails easement, whatever it's called, is that actually on the deed, legally enforceable, and who enforces it? And I've got a couple other questions, but we'll take them one at a time.
So here I'm going to play attorney, which I'm not supposed to do, but I'll tell you my understanding of the floating easement. The rationale for a floating easement is we don't know actually where a trail system should be out there. No one does. There needs to be a lot of reports done in terms of where the resources are and what best makes sense for the larger Valley Center community. So that's the concept of a floating easement, where it identifies that a trail system should be on the property, put some parameters around what kind of impacts can occur or not occur, but allows flexibility. And so is it legally enforceable? Absolutely. You probably want know more of the details, and those are being drafted right now, those agreements and easements, and we'll have those provided before any open session of the board meeting. So they are legally enforceable easements.
Then doesn't it make sense that the trails map or the trails locations, even roughly speaking, would be part of the management plan, which outlines all of those other resources that need to be protected, at least in the context of saying, this is where a trail would be allowable, this is where it would not be allowable?
Yeah, so Fred, absolutely. That's the habitat management plan. It looks at the resources and any uses out there. Trail alignment is a use. And to be clear about that though, a line on a map doesn't mean it's designed, doesn't mean it's environmentally cleared. All that's a second and later process. All the habitat management plan is doing is identifying the location of the resources and what could be considered compatible or not compatible.
I understand.
Why it's important though is to distinction. There's both cost and effort to do the design and plan and environmental review.
And what assurances do we have that that there's going to be outreach to the community? What assurances do we have that we're actually going to be involved in this process during this 18-month period of time? Because there's been no transparency in this process from day one.
So I think that I identified exactly what we envision. We want everybody to work together. We want the county to be working. We want the public and the community to work together. We want the environmental groups to be working. So how do we do that? So that's where ultimately the Sandag and Caltrans has approval authority over the habitat management plan. If you don't think things are going well, then you come to our board and you state your issue that things are not going well and you want that changed. That's the Sandag has the ability to approve or not approve the habitat management plan. We also have the ability to allow for an easement to be transferred or not transferred. So it's a checks and balance where ultimately, if you're feeling like their voice is not heard, there is a recourse, and that recourse is the Sandag board.
And one last question, and I'll be quiet and let other people ask questions. So when is fee title transfer? When is fee title transferred? Before the management plan is completed and acceptable, or after it's completed and acceptable?
As envisioned right now, the contract would transfer fee title. Caltrans would have to go to the CTC Commission to transfer title. And at that point in time, prior to the title transfer, Sandag would get an access easement over the land for a trail system. The title transfer would occur prior to the habitat management plan, but Sandag would still enter into a contract that said we have to approve that habitat management plan. So it's a contractual obligation that the public and the stakeholders will be involved via Sandag's holding of that contract.
But you can take back fee title after you've given it to them if you don't like the management plan?
Again, Sandag doesn't have fee title at all. It's state-owned property. State transfers title. What Sandag's recourse is twofold. We say that the habitat management plan is not appropriate or not adequate, which I don't think is going to be the case here. But let's go down that course. And then we make sure that whatever participation there is included. And then we also have the ability for an access easement. So again, it's double things. It's both the habitat management plan and the access easement. Both are enforceable by Sandag under a contract or easement.
But Caltrans has already transferred title.
That's correct.
So there's no recourse after you've given it away. You can maybe hold back some money if you want to.
And we'll clarify this one point and then move on to another question. So to clarify that, no, we would have legal recourse as part of the conservation easement, legal recourse as part of the access easement. So we can push the issue if people felt like they aren't being heard, they bring it to our Sandag board. And ultimately it's a decision made by, making sure that we review the documents against what's being proposed. And I mentioned this is not new. This is being done all the time for habitat management plans.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing those documents.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Going down the list, I have Doug as the next one on the list.
Doug, you can unmute your microphone and we can hear you.
Does that do it?
Yep, that did it.
Oh, okay. I'm new at this. Bear with me. I'm sorry. I'm new.
We can hear you well.
The whole thing. My question was, I see some similarities in the ranch, Lilac Ranch versus another ranch in the system over in Ramona, and I'm wondering when Sandag looked at this as a mitigation for what they were going to do with the freeway, the 76. Was there any kind of a stipulation about how the property would be maintained or what the objective was? Was it to be a ranch or was it to be open space? Or can you answer that, or is it more open-ended than that?
Sure, no, I mean, matter of fact, Bruce April and I, Bruce April's on the call tonight. He and I went out there and took a look at the property and we said, wow, this is a great property, but it was purchased specifically for the net benefit of the State Route 76 project. And so what does that mean? That's all a bunch of fancy terms. But it meant that there's, 76 was doing environmental damage that the ordinance, what we call Transnet, said you needed to mitigate above and beyond the normal mitigation. You need to create a net benefit. So working with a bunch of stakeholders that Caltrans facilitated open public meetings, what came out of that whole process was net benefit meant conserving a big piece of property that facilitated wildlife through the San Luis Rey system, which Route 76 was impacting. This property met all those checks, and in addition, it had wonderful historic resources. It was slated for development, so this conserved the entire property. And now we're at the end of that, where we're now trying to transfer it from the state to another entity.
Right.
So that's a wonderful piece of property. Let me ask Bruce April if you wanted to add anything to that, since you were part of this from the beginning. And Bruce may have.
I don't know if he's on.
Okay.
Well,
Please, Doug, you have a follow-up question?
well, I guess the last question I was thinking of was the historical aspects. We haven't mentioned that much tonight. It's been mostly environmental. And, so I guess there's some rich historical history there that needs to be woven into the equation. And I guess that's part of the planning process. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's one of the nice things about some of the properties that are being acquired by the county overall, is that they have these historical features, and something we are fortunate to be able to take advantage of. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, just to follow up on the historical, there's a historical covenant placed upon the properties, so those buildings can't be removed or damaged, which is nice. And the proposal from the San Diego Habitat Conservancy is actually to open those up for school children, to give them kind of a hands-on historical aspect and experience. So I thought that was a really great idea. We'll move on.
Okay, our next person on the list would be Joaquin Aganza.
Hi.
Hi, Joaquin.
This is Joaquin Aganza. I'm the president of the Friends of Howell Canyon. And my concern about this property is the historical aspect. Looking at the description on their website for San Diego Habitat Conservancy, none of their properties that are listed or described as having historical value. Having gone over this property and seeing the tremendous United Nations Charter, Eleanor Roosevelt, Mahatma Gandhi, other historical figures that have visited there, make it a remarkable resource for education in addition to its habitat value. My concern is San Diego Habitat Conservancy doesn't seem to have a track record of handling historical properties. This property seems to be a lot more congruent to Wilderness Gardens Preserve, which has a historical mill and is managed by the county with some trails, and also a large portion of Wilderness Gardens doesn't have trails and is managed as a preserve for its habitat value. It seems that the county is in the best position to handle this type of complex property rather than San Diego Habitat Conservancy, which may look good on paper, but if this was a job interview, I would really question their experience. Can you comment on that?
Yes, and I'm going to actually ask Kim, give her a fair warning on the adding to this comment. So there's a historical covenant placed upon the property, and you're actually right. The property needs to be managed both for the habitat values and also the prehistoric values and the historic values. The San Diego Habitat Conservancy in their RFP, actually our RFP required people to explain how they're going to manage for the historic values of the property. And they have brought on a sub-consultant, and I'm going to ask Kim if she has more details that I have either forgotten or add to this.
No, I think you've said it. I mean, their proposal, they were bringing on a historical architect. They were going to do some rehabilitation of some of the buildings. Docent-led tours was in their proposal, just to bring back those historic aspects and share them with the community. And they had also they had reached out to the Valley Center Historical Society, with some of the aspects of, they have a lot of the materials from, those journals from some of those visits from the president. And so I know that the San Diego Habitat Conservancy had been working with them to partner. So
I think it's going to be amazing when that building can be, school kindergartens can go in that building and see all those history and all those documents. It's going to be a great site. Can we go on, Kim?
okay.
Keith, I apologize. When you get a chance, I would love to have a word, but understood that you're going through public comment right now.
We can do that.
Okay, the next person on the list is Bill Tibbetts.
Thank you very much. Just by way of background, I was the Southern California manager for the conservation programs for the state of California. And Rancho Lilac and the Transnet project are all very well known to me. And we have, when I was with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we had a great relationship working with Sandag. They made good choices. I think their processes are transparent, and with the right kind of constraints, I think the process is working pretty well. The idea of a floating easement makes some sense, but I think as part of the habitat management plan, we want to know, at least relatively clearly, where the entrance and exit points to connect to other, potentially connecting to other trails might be in North County. But the most important thing is it really was a habitat conservation mitigation purchase. And so it's essential that the habitat management plan prioritize the location and sensitivity of all of the natural resources on the property. Then look at the cultural resources, historical and prehistoric. And only after all those things are fully mapped and evaluated, then look at the path of least resistance that might make sense for trails. That's the only way that I think, from my perspective, this should be looked at. Many of us have worked with the county trying to find ways to have them better manage their properties. We've had a lot of problems with lots of unauthorized trails being created on preserved lands, a lot of excess use by mountain bikers and others, and I bicycle, so I know the incentive. But this is a very sensitive habitat. It was purchased at a great cost by the public for those purposes. So I would highly, highly recommend that the system look and map everything adequately, bring that back to the public, show us where the areas are that you think might be worth looking at in terms of putting that floating easement and pinning it down, but only after all of the resources are fully mapped out and fully evaluated in terms of sensitivities and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And I think you've just described how the habitat management plan gets developed. It looks at the property, it looks at all the resources on the property, the biological, cultural, historic, and it develops a system of what is critical for preservation and what you can have more accommodating human use out there. So I think you are absolutely right. And you are right in terms of the Valley Center community as larger needs to figure out where the trails are, where the connections come on the property. And that's all part of the process to work together with the larger jurisdiction, in this case, the County of San Diego, and the proposed land manager.
Okay, our next person is Julie Picotte.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I am the president of the Valley Center Vaqueros. We have probably at the moment a little over 100 members. We're very active in the community as equestrians. And I've also served on the Friends of Hellhole Canyon board. I'd served on that for probably a little over 8 years. As far as I know, the only really designated equestrian trails that we have access to in Valley Center is in Hellhole Canyon. So I do love hearing that you guys are leaning towards having this Rancho Lilac be open to the public for trail access. Are you thinking it'll be open just for hikers or equestrians, also mountain bikers? My other question was that I live very close to there. I actually can ride my horse to the Yellow Deli, enjoy lunch, ride home. What's going to happen with the Yellow Deli? Because as far as I know, that's still on that same property. So I'd like to kind of hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Sure, and I'll say with regards to what type of use, equestrian, trails, mountain biking, hiking, Sandag's not the best entity to determine that. I think the best entity is looking at the community plan as a larger entity and figure out where those equestrian trails, where those biking trails, where those hiking trails all connect up to the whole Valley Center. I think the County of San Diego is much better suited for that, and I think that should be part of the community plan update process. With regards to the Yellow Deli, the Yellow Deli has been a tenant for the previous owner and still a tenant right now. And the envisionment right now, I will speak for San Diego Habitat Conservancy because they've already indicated that they want to continue having that entity going forward as a tenant.
Do you mind if I jump in really quick, Keith and Kim?
Sure, Ben, can you keep it short? We have a lot of people on the attendees.
I'll just quick. I appreciate it, Julie. Here's the difference. The San Diego Conservancy is looking for an easement. They are going to put an easement on a piece of property and say the county will take it over at a later date, construct it, maintain it, and give it liability insurance. What the County of San Diego is saying is if we do that, what we're doing is we're actually limiting our benefit of the tax dollars that we put into District 5. And the reason why I say that is because we don't get the benefit of the climate action plan. We don't get the benefit of the North County Habitat Plan, and we don't get the benefit of the general plan open space easement requirements. So what the County of San Diego is doing, and through Supervisor Jim Desmond's office, we're advocating that this does not go to the Conservancy, because what we'll do on day one, if we take this over, this is the County of San Diego talking, day one, we're going to start opening it up to the public. The difference is there's an easement, which does not gain you trails, or the County of San Diego will construct trails. Big difference there. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And again, remember the reason we're protecting the property was purchased for the conservation values. So we can't have to make sure that any trail access is compatible with the conservation values of those. So when we move on, Kim, who's the next speaker?
Hannah Engholm.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, I have a little bit of background noise. Can you hear me okay?
We can. You're coming in loud
Okay.
and clear.
Good. I've got a toddler in the other room. I think a quick question. Now, forgive me. I was on earlier before we got rudely interrupted, and so this might have already been asked. But my understanding now is that the next step now is for Sandag staff to put forth a recommendation to the Sandag board. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like Sandag has two options. Either put forth a recommendation for the proposal for the Conservancy to take on this management contract and get the deed, or the Sandag staff could recommend to the board to reject the proposal and reinstate the process. First, I'd like you to confirm whether or not that's an accurate understanding. And then second, it sounds like the county is in a position to take on all of the complexities involved with taking on this property and managing all aspects of it, rather than having to kind of piecemeal it with the Conservancy and maybe having an easement here and bringing in other people for the historical aspect there and things like that. Why is Sandag then not recommending to the board to reject the current proposal and give the county an opportunity?
Well, thank you for getting back on after we were rudely interrupted there. Appreciate all attendees coming back. The process right now is through a state law, through our contract. We've basically sent out an RFP, and we're responding to the people that responded to that RFP. The San Diego Habitat Conservancy, their proposal was selected as the best proposal. We've negotiated a fair price with them for the management of the land, and we're adding additional certainties and securities to make sure that trail can be accommodated in the future. So we first have to go through that process. The board's the ultimate decision maker. So in open session at the board, you can make your own opinion and tell the board what you think they should do. Our recommendation is based upon who applied through the RFP process.
This is still Hannah. Does the Sandag staff have the option to recommend a rejection to the board?
I don't think we would be going forward with a reduction. We actually have supported we've come to terms with the San Diego Habitat Conservancy, and now it's up to our board to either go forward with that recommendation, modify that recommendation, or decide to do something different. So it's all up to the board right now. Our recommendation still stands from our May 22nd, which is to enter into a contract with San Diego Habitat Conservancy with the addition now of the access easement and the resource, the exclusivity agreement with the County of San Diego.
Keith, if I may add, just the county has an opportunity to bid like anybody else, and they chose not to for whatever reason they have. We give ample opportunities but we have a process and we have to respect the outcome of that process. Obviously, the board could reject our recommendation, but our recommendation right now is going to be for the Conservancy that won this through a bidding process, fair and clear. The county never contacted us for an interest when it was there, and the process has concluded, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay, our next person on the list is Julie Feliciano.
Okay, hi. So I did miss a lot of this because I didn't realize that we got started again. So I'm not going to ask a lot of questions that were probably covered. I just want to really emphasize how important it is to many of us who live here in Valley Center to be able to have public access to this land. And so I think most people would be very respectful of the environmental issues. I'm sure some people, never are, just like the people who interrupted the meeting earlier. Yeah. But it is really very important. And what I am asking for is that the public have permanent access to some trails on this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think our proposal will have the ability to accommodate those future public trails and have the certainty that those trails can't be precluded by another entity.
Okay, next up is Pam Whedon Keller.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Pam.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions actually. I do realize there is some history here and that the county did not submit a proposal several years ago. I think there were probably economic reasons why that happened then. I will say that I know you have spent some time on this and negotiated an agreement with SDHC. However, the decisions you make today will last many lifetimes. And I really encourage you to take another look at what is being done and consider that it really will last forever. And I do have some questions. First, I have 3 questions. I would like to know what is the dollar amount that you have negotiated for the land management of this property?
You want to do all 3 of your questions and then I can respond?
Sure. That's number 1. Number 2, the floating easement. Does it include equestrian staging area, parking for vehicles, and sanitation facilities? Okay. And number 3, since there is no funding guarantee, I do not see how you can ensure that there will be trails built on it. It is quite clear that the county is disinclined to take it on without getting the benefits that Ben Mills has enumerated. So I almost think that you are trying to put a Band-Aid on something, but you're really not guaranteeing the public access via trails since there is no funding mechanism. And I just would like that to be confirmed.
Thanks, Pam. Let me address those in order. So the value for the San Diego Habitat Conservancy is for a total price of $7 million, just shy of $7 million. And that's for perpetual management. It includes both startup costs and for future ongoing costs. The second question with regards to, the floating easements, You bring up good points. So the floating easements have not been drafted yet. Our attorneys are drafting those, our outside counsel. And we have always envisioned staging areas would be part of that floating easement, because you can't have trails without having a staging area. You bring up sanitation areas and equestrian staging areas. We haven't actually thought about that. Again, I don't think Sandag's in the best position for determining what kind of use should be out there, but we want to be able to accommodate whatever uses are coming through that Valley Center community plan update. And the final thing about funding, you're absolutely right. Sandag is not proposing that we pay for trails to be built out there. The San Diego Habitat Conservancy is not proposing that they build trails out there. Right now, the proposal is that there was concern that if the property transferred to a private entity, that would preclude trails. What we're proposing is that an access easement doesn't preclude trails. It accommodates, it allows for future trails. It doesn't fund those, to be clear, but it allows for the to happen in the future. So that is absolutely correct. There's no guaranteed funding, but there is no guaranteed funding right now. And ultimately, it's the County of San Diego's call whether they choose to, how they choose to allocate their funding for future trails. So let me do a time check. I know we're interrupted, so let's go another half an hour if everybody's okay. We still have people raising their hands, and I'd like to get through this as much as we can.
Okay, our next person up is Pamela Heatherington.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I like the way that this is being presented tonight. Thank you, Sandag staff and Hassan. There is always the concern from the environmental community about what's on the ground, and that needs to be assessed thoroughly before any trails can be even considered. So I'm not saying that we're going to oppose trails down the line, but we want to make sure that whatever is offered is not going to interrupt the historical, cultural, or biological importance of this area. I think that if the trails advocates in Valley Center are looking for funding for trails, there's plenty of opportunities throughout the state of California where private groups have funded trail maintenance and trail building. So when it comes to that point, maybe there is some community activism that can take place, but definitely not until after the biological, cultural, and historic assessments are agreed to by all the wildlife agencies and those people that are in charge of such things. So thank you for opening this up to the public, and that was quite the photo bomb. Thanks.
Yes, again, sorry for that rude interruption we had, and thank you for coming back on the call. And Pamela, just to address your issue, so we have the habitat management plan. That's exactly what we intended to do, which is to have the property owner, the county, the stakeholders work together and figure out what's on that property and where best use for future public use can go.
Okay, our next question would be from Micah Matrosky.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Micah, we can.
Hi, good evening. Micah Matrosky, the environmental organizer with IBEW Local Union 569, the Electricians Union, speaking on behalf of our over 3,400 members. And we agree, mine is more of a comment versus a question. We agree with our partners in the Wildlife and Habitat Conservation Coalition and the points they're raising. I'd like to highlight their letter of August 28th and also echo the points just raised by Pam Heatherington. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Micah.
Okay, our next question is from Anita Nuwan.
Hi, Anita, if you could just turn on your mic.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
There, thank you.
I was delayed by my last name. It's Noon. I'm the trail master for Valley Center Trails Association. And first, I want to thank you all for your work on this and for this meeting this evening. I'm sure you can appreciate how frustrating it is when we find that this property might continue to be inaccessible for years after such a long delay already. And to be clear, it is equally frustrating to hear that you are going to keep your recommendation from May, even though practically it is more efficient, quicker, and more streamlined to give the project to the county. I'm a taxpayer and a former local government employee of many years. And I don't understand why you wouldn't want to accomplish your goal in the easiest and quickest way. And my only question is, when will the staff recommendation report to the board be made available?
So our staff reports come out 1 week prior to the board meeting. When the board directs us to go back, either in November or December, we'll have a report out a week ahead of time.
All right, I look forward to that. Thank you.
And then you'll have an opportunity, everyone on this call, to address the board, both in open session.
Okay, next up is Diane Nygaard.
Good evening. I'm Diane Nygaard with Preserve Calavera. This Rancho Lilac really is a major acquisition, and acquiring land to preserve it is always the first step. But then it's critical that it's managed to protect those resources. So I'm just concerned that this delay already has put things at risk. And so to my mind, it's very important that we make sure that we can move this forward expeditiously. And I think while this is a complex process that you've laid out, I think it's one that really assures that all of the stakeholder voices can be heard and considered as this moves forward, and it really provides for a process to deal with what started out as a very complex issue. So we certainly support that, but really think it's important to get this land under contract and managed and be protecting all of the resources on site as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back up to the top of the list, and I think Mr. Rudolph, you have your hand up. Either it was still up or it's up again, so.
I'm still up.
Okay.
What it comes down to in the end is that you're unprepared to take the quick and easy solution is to recommend to the board to terminate the process and offer the property to the county, and the county will immediately start the process of doing the management plan just the same as any other taker of the property would have to do, and would take into consideration all the things that our environmental friends are concerned about, because we're part of their environmental friends. Probably everybody out there who's responding to this tonight is a member of the Sierra Club or some other environmental organization. We have the same concerns, but we think that the county does too, and that the county will do quite well taking care of that, as well as providing us with trails. What you're proposing to do is to give us a phony easement that the only way we would ever get trails there is if we can get Bill Gates to supply those with the money that needs to do it, because the county can't and won't. So it's a Trojan horse.
So Donald, I have to object to the idea of phony or Trojan. It is an easement. It's an enforceable easement. I understand how you think that there's no funding behind that, and ultimately that's a decision that the County of San Diego would have to make. With regards to the ultimate decision, it's the Sandag board's decision. Staff just makes a recommendation. The Sandag board will make a decision in open council. Anybody on this call will be able to provide them with an opinion and give them their input. So thank you very much.
Okay, I see that Fred, your hand is up again.
Okay, okay. Just circling back to the historical properties, in that the Valley Center Historical Society was involved in this project from 2012 through, I believe, 2018 or 19, when they walked away from the project because they felt they couldn't work with San Diego Habitat Conservancy. So I'll leave it at that. And again, thank you all for doing this. And I too want this done as fast as possible, but I want it done right, because like Pam said, what's decided now, our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren live with it. And I agree with Rich. We're all members of lots of different environmental organizations and believe in that. Otherwise, we wouldn't do this. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Hey, Kim, do you have any more insight on the Historical Society?
You know, we were working with them as part of establishing the historical covenant, and they were going to be the assignee for the historical covenant. We worked with them, and then as of 2018, I believe, we received an email that said they were not interested anymore. So his statement is Fred's is correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I see Lori Flores' hand is up.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, Lori.
Thanks for getting back to me again. The San Diego Conservancy that you want to transfer the property to is an entity, and it can go away. It will not exist forever. Organizations don't. A similar conservancy, the Environmental Trust, did go bankrupt because of bad management. And when that happens, all of a sudden, all the properties aren't owned by anybody, but all the money has gone away. That could happen here, and it has happened. It seems far less likely that the county would go away. So if you want to actually preserve this property and make sure it doesn't get lost, which is what happens when a conservancy goes bankrupt, because nobody wants that property without the endowment attached. If you want to make sure it actually does survive, the county is a far better choice. Thank you.
Thank you on that. I do want to address the financial aspects of this project. You brought up a bankruptcy of trusts and conservancies. The Environmental Trust taught a lesson to all those involved in these kind of land management and those like us who provide funding for land managers, a good lesson, which is you shouldn't have the finances held by the people that are managing the property. You need to have a firewall. So built into this proposal is, regardless of who takes it on, a third party would be managing that fund and the endowment for the land management. The identification right now has been for San Diego Foundation to hold it. They only allow a certain amount to be released, and that release has to be done on an annual basis based upon the habitat management plan. So we've learned a lot since the Environmental Trust days. We have a firewall now between the financial people holding the money and the people doing the land management. And so I think we've addressed a lot of the issues about what happens if a conservancy does go away. The funding would not. It would still stay in an endowment. But thank you for your comment.
One point of clarification, Keith, and I appreciate it, is the difference between the two is one was going to preserve the trails and manage and construct, and the other is not. The County of San Diego would construct, preserve, and manage the trails even during a bankruptcy, which with the County of San Diego is probably not going to happen compared to the San Diego Conservancy. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. And again, our board members will hear all this input and be able to provide any comments and as part of their decision-making process.
Okay, Bill Tibbetts is next.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a few clarifications. I think there might be some misconceptions. The reference to the Environmental Trust, it failed because of several reasons. One, Keith mentioned that they should not manage their own money, and the San Diego Foundation manages tens of millions of dollars for lots of NGOs. It's good. It's a great opportunity. The biggest problem was the Environmental Trust miscalculated how much it cost to manage lands. They always underestimated it because there was not a good quantitative way to do that. There is now. In the last 20 years, there have been many ways to actually appropriately identify how much money it costs, and that's what the endowment is based upon. So that is no longer a really significant issue to my mind. Another thing is that the county annually appropriates money. There's no assurance that the county will continue to appropriate money either. There are lots of county properties, open space properties, that have huge deficiencies in terms of deferred maintenance, trail issues that are not being dealt with year after year after year after people complain about it. So it's not that the county is necessarily bad, because all land managers have some problems managing lands, but it's not a panacea to have the county do it. I guess another question I have, or comment I have, is that the county mentioned, or I guess Mr. Desmond's representative mentioned, that the county won't get credit for, I guess, carbon sequestration or something like that. The land is open space. It will be like lots of other private open space. If it's conserved, it contributes to the county's overall contribution of open space that helps manage for greenhouse gases. So just because transferring it to the county in ownership or whatever isn't going to make any difference in terms of how you calculate greenhouse gases emissions. And the last problem I have is that the county has funded the coast to desert trail system. Portions of that go through private lands and everything else. So it's not like the county has to own the land to put the trail on it, because that's not how trail systems work. The county is full of private lands, public lands, and all the rest. And trail systems are slowly woven through all of that, as long as the trail follows the right appropriate settings for avoiding sensitive habitats, not creating unsafe, risky conditions, trail conditions, and all that. So I just wanted to clarify a bunch of those points that have been raised, which I think are not always correct or on point. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. And for those in line, we're trying to answer questions. I think comments like that are great for our board members to hear. And we hope that you do provide comments to our board after reading the staff report, which is coming forth in the future.
Okay, Pam Whedon Keller.
Hi, thanks. Just to clarify, I was under my impression was that San Diego Habitat for Conservancy does not have any experience managing a property of this size. It seems like the average size of their preserves are about 69 acres. It looks like they've got 6.2 acres. And then my concern is this is a substantially large piece of property that I'm not convinced that they have the resources or the knowledge of how to manage it based on what I see as their current inventory. Can you confirm that?
I think you confirm the numbers are correct. They have a website. They have properties on that website. They're also looking for other additional contracts for other additional properties. They're a qualified land manager. I think the issue about the size of the property, you're also correct. This would be the largest property in their inventory. And I think the issue really goes down to if you have an opinion about the qualifications of the land manager, you can pass that along to the Sandag board as part of the decision.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
Okay, Pam Heatherington.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to speak again. Keith, will you have land managers on site once the property has passed all of the biological, historical, and cultural assessments before it's open to the public? Will you have those established? People living there, or rangers, or how will that day-to-day management look? Do you know?
That's a good point. And I should probably mention right now, there is a caretaker of the property. There's houses that they live in right now. Don Scholes, I know you're still on. Do you want to address what you envision for on-site management in the future?
Yeah, so just to start with, a lot of the initial duties, both related to the biological resources as well as the historic resources, is going to be a significant effort over the first few years, as well as preparing the habitat management plan. So we'll have certainly a more than constant presence throughout, let me say, like the first 2 to 3 years. And then after that, the required monitoring of the biological resources and historic resources and the management of facilities on site, that's going to require just about a full-time person on staff. So as far as our staff goes, we envision a person that'll be dedicated full-time, but as Keith also mentioned, we envision keeping the caretaker that's there, at least for the foreseeable future. And then there'll be other activities as well that there'll be presence on site. So yes, there'll be just about a full-time presence and full-time personnel that will be on site.
Thank you for that, Don. A further question too, Keith. I talked to a legal person the other day, actually a retired attorney who is familiar and does a lot of equestrian riding at Sycamore Canyon, Gooden Ranch. And she said that the instances of mountain biking spooking horses has increased to the point where equestrians aren't riding the area as much. In order for us to be assured that if a trail goes through on this property, how will it be managed if it's not going to be managed by the San Diego Habitat Conservancy and the county picks it up? And we know that the county sometimes has trouble keeping the mountain biking community on the actual trails. So that's a big concern of ours.
Yeah, I can't address that because I think the entity that would have to be proposing the trail out there, and I hope it is the County of San Diego, would have to explain how they're managing the property, and they would have to work with whoever the owner of the property is. And so I think that's the synergy we're trying to create, is the land manager who's conserving the resources works together with the land manager who's has the trail system. So I understand your concern. I think it's just premature to talk about that.
So Keith, I do not see any more hands raised.
Okay. I think we have one more, maybe.
One more. Yes, Hannah Engholm.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm, and perhaps this is just because I missed some of what Mr. Mills was saying earlier, and maybe Mr. Mills can chime in and correct my understanding, but my understanding was that the county isn't particularly interested in building the trails under the current proposal that and the adjustments that Sandag has been working so hard to implement for this this upcoming proposal to the board. And again, Mr. Mills, please correct me if my understanding is incorrect. Then my next question, if my understanding is accurate, then my next question is back to you, Mr. Greer. And in learning, if that is accurate, in learning that the county is either not very interested or entirely uninterested in building the trails under this exclusive contract, does that not change the Sandag staff position about whether or not they're going to recommend this proposal go forward?
Let me address the second part first, and then I'll ask Ben if you'd like to have a few minutes to respond. Right now, there's no trails out there. Right now, there's no funding for trails out there. However, the County of San Diego has, every year they adopt an annual budget, and they can choose how they choose to fund different trails. I think the approach that we're taking here is we're creating an access easement given to the rights to Sandag, but that access easement is transferable. And what that means is once the design, once the environmental clearance is done, it can be transferred to any entity that chooses to maintain and operate those trails. We hope it's the County of San Diego, but if it's not, it can be transferred to a third party, a nonprofit, or another entity. That's the assurances that we're being able to provide as part of this agreements and part of these easements that we have going forward. Ben, do you want to quickly respond?
I appreciate it, Keith. Ms. Engel, I'll just be very, very blunt. We want to take over the preserve. We want to manage the preserve, and we're willing to put in money to manage that preserve. To answer your question, the issue is if we only take over the easements, only take over the trails, we don't get credit for a lot of other issues that the taxpayers have to pay for. Climate action plan, multiple species conservation plan, and our general planned open space policies. So to answer your question, can we do it? Probably, but I don't think it's not the best bang for our buck. And the reason why we want to take it over is because we can take it all over. We can pay for the difference between the endowment that the Conservation Habitat Conservancy is willing to pay and what we're willing to pay. We'll put the $500,000 in there. We'll make sure the trail works. The difference is what can we get out of this piece of land? And personally, I think that taxpayer money should be open to the taxpayer dollars. So every public figure and every public member should be open to what they pay for.
Thank you, Ben. And again, the Sandag board will be talking about this, and opportunities for Supervisor Desmond to chime in on his position with the board will be available. I think we all want the same thing. We all want to have the property preserved. I'm so happy that it wasn't built on. I'm really pleased that it's conserved. And now, how do you make that wise use of land management, conserving the property while providing for trails and access? And so that's where we're heading towards. I don't see any more hands raised.
No.
I do want to apologize again on behalf of Sandag for our rude interruption. I think, again, I can't apologize enough. We are going to talk certainly at Sandag about having another meeting, since we did lose a lot of people, and see about having another opportunity to address this issue next week. And again, all our staff report and everything for our board will be going to hearings, and the board will direct us when that public hearing is going to be available, and your opportunity to speak directly to the board members will occur there. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Akrada, or if he's got any closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Keith and Kim. I appreciate the community participating in this, and again, sorry about the rude interruption. We will have another chance to hear from you and answer your questions, but let me just make it very clear so we're very truthful. We are, our recommendation have accommodated, had to obtain an easement for a future trail. I also want to say that the county has ample opportunity to bid, but we had a process we have to respect. That process yielded the entity that we're negotiating with right now, and that will be the staff recommendation. Obviously, the final sayer in this is the board, and that is one thing you should expect from us is consistent outreach and discussion, but we look forward to that, and we will have another meeting for you to voice your opinion. And again, I want to thank everyone who took the time to write emails and make comment tonight. And especially I want to thank Keith Greer and Kim Smith for their amazing work.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Take care.